Next, we're going to look at what happens with inflation. So you buy a 1-year 7% coupon bond for $1,000. Now, notice this says, what is your real rate of return if inflation is? And anytime you see the terms real, inflation, and you may see nominal, if you see 2 out of 3 of those words, real, inflation, and nominal, then you can bet you're going to use our real rate of return formula that's going to show up here soon on the slide. So be on the lookout for those words in problems. If you see real and inflation, then you're going to need that formula. So if inflation is 2%, I buy a 1-year 7% coupon bond for $1,000. Well, now notice, since I paid the $1,000 for this, that means the yield to maturity must be 7%. And since it's a 1-year bond, it's going to mature in 1 year, so that means I'm going to make 7% on this bond. And actually, that is pretty much guaranteed because it's a 1-year bond. There's nothing else to happen there. I'm not going to sell this bond at the end of the year because it matures and it pays me. So I know exactly how much I pay for it today and exactly how much I'm going to get in the future, and there's nothing variable about that. So I can be sure that since it's a 1-year bond that will mature next year, I'm going to make 7%. Right? Now, what's my real rate of return? If inflation is 2%, well, here's the formula I was talking to you about. 1 plus the nominal return. Now, the nominal return in this case is going to be 7%. That's what I'll make in nominal terms, just the amount I'll make on that bond. So I just have to put that in here for nominal. 2% is the inflation rate, and that's the answer, 4.9%. Okay? All right, and then this is asking, again, we've done these TIPS problems. I'm just going to multiply. This is a 1-year TIPS, so it just pays me $1,040 next year. And since it's a TIPS bond, it will be adjusted for inflation, so I'll just multiply it times the inflation rate. Now, this question is, what's my nominal return? Now, to find my nominal return, notice I paid $1,000 for this bond. At the end of the year, I got 1,060.8 out of it. That implies a rate of return. I hope you can see that that is 6.08%. It's a nominal return, right? Yes. So if I take the money I end up with divided by the cost at the beginning minus 1, that's my return. We usually just call this return, but when we throw inflation in the equation, we specify it as nominal return, meaning it hasn't been adjusted for inflation. Okay? Now the next question is going to say, what's your real rate of return? What's your real return? Well, I'm just going to take 1 plus the nominal divided by 1 plus the inflation minus 1. And not surprisingly, that's 4%. And this example just kind of shows you how TIPS work. When I bought this bond, I paid $1,000 for it, meaning the yield and the coupon rate were the same. So when I bought this bond, I had an expectation that I was going to make a 4% return on it. Right? Now, inflation went up, so the price went up, so my nominal return went up. But adjusted for inflation, I get that 4% return that I expected from the beginning. So that's the beauty of the Treasury inflation protected securities, is that your real return stays constant. So you buy it today, you lock in a real return by buying this bond because the payments will be adjusted up for inflation. Okay, I'm going to skip through this slide. I think, well, I don't have the answers here, so I'm going to work these. These are good practice problems for you. Since I don't have the answers here, I'm going to work these. We've done a lot of these, so I'll go through it quickly. What's the amount of the coupon payment in year 2? Well, the coupon payment every year is $35. Now, since this is in year 2, I've got to take care of the inflation over the last 2 years. So times 1.0375, that takes care of inflation last year, and then times 1.0225, so 37.13. That's the answer there. What's the amount of the payment in year 3? Well, remember the bond matures in year 3, so I would expect to get 1,035 if there were no inflation, but now this is the 3 years, so I've got 3 years of inflation, so times 1.0205, that's the first year. 1.0375 will give me the second year. Let me make sure I get that 7.5. And then the last first year 1.0225. That takes care of all the inflation, and the answer here is A. Okay? All right. Okay, capital gain and current yield. So there are two ways to make money from a bond. One is to sell it at a higher price. So you buy it today, sometime in the future you sell it at a higher price. That is called a capital gain. Right? And we typically talk about capital gain as a percentage of the original price. So the percent change in price is the capital gain that you make. Right? We've already talked about current yield. Just to remind you, it's the coupon divided by the price. So if you can see that there's two ways to make money from a bond. You sell it at a higher price, and the other way is you collect the coupon payments. And these two together add up to the total return that you get from owning that bond. Right? So let's go through the example here. Might probably make it a little clearer. So I've got a 4-year 9% coupon bond with a yield to maturity of 6%. What price would you pay for the bond today? Well, we've done a lot of these, so I think you guys probably got this figured out. So 4 is in, the payment's 90, future value is 1,000. I'm going to, the yield to maturity is 6, solve for the price, 1,103.95. I think I'm going to need that, so I'm going to store that in memory 1. And then 1 year later, the yield to maturity is still 6. What would you pay for the bond? Well, now the only thing that's different is it's in is 3. The yield to maturity is still 6. The payment's still 90. Future value is 1,000. There's the price I'd pay for that bond. So A is the price I'd pay for that bond today. Right? And so the next question says, all right, well, given that, what was your percent capital gain over the year? Well, capital gain is the percentage change in price. So find the percentage change in anything, I take the new value. So the price 1, that's the new value, which is 1080.19. I'm going to divide it by the old value, 103.95, subtract 1, and that's my answer there, 2.15%. So A is the answer here. And that would be my percent capital gain over the year. It's just how much the price changed in percentage terms. So the new price divided by the old price minus 1. That's going to tell you your percent capital gain. The next question says, well, what's the current yield on the day you buy the bond? So specified on the day you buy the bond because the current yield says, well, you paid a certain amount for this bond and then a year later you received a coupon. What was your return on the investment just from the coupon? So this pays a $90 coupon, so 90 divided by the price I paid for the bond, 103.95, and that is an 8.15% return. All right. And so the question here is, what's the total return on the investment? Well, there are two ways to do it. I could say, let me look at the money I ended up with because I sold it for 1080.19 and I collected a $90 coupon payment. So I ended up with that much money divided by the price I paid for it, which is 1103.95, and then subtract 1 and you can see that's a 6% return. Okay, I've got some extra decimals out here from rounding, but that's a 6% return, right? Another way to do it is see that the total return has to equal the current yield plus capital gain, right? Because there's the only two ways I can get a return from this bond: collecting the coupon payments, that's represented by the current yield, or selling it at a price different than the one I paid for it. That's capital gain. In this case, the capital gain is negative. I made enough off of the current yield to make my yield 6%. Okay, notice it should be 6% because when we bought the bond, the yield was 6% and nothing changed. When we sold the bond, the yield was 6%. So that's a 6% return. Okay, so these are good practice problems to go through. I'll give you the answers here. I encourage you to try them on your own. So I've told you the purchase price here, $1.10. 1 year later, you need to figure out what the price would be when you sell the bond. Well, let's see, it's an $80 payment, 1,000 future value. It's 1 year later, so N is 4. Yield to maturity is 6. And I'm going to get a price here, that much. Now this just wants to know the capital gain, so that's just the percentage change in price. I'm going to divide by the beginning price, which is 1010. 1,010, subtract 1, 5.87, B is the answer, 5.87. And then what's the current yield the day you purchase the bond? Well, it's an $80 coupon divided by the price I paid for it, which is 1,010, and that is 7.92%. And then the next question says, what's your total return for a 1-year investment in the bond? Well, I can do it both ways. I can say, well, I'm going to sell it for $10.69.30. I collected the $80 coupon, so that's the amount of money I end up with at the end of the year. Divide that by 1,010. Subtract 1. Didn't push a key here somewhere, so 1069.3. I'm going to add $80 to it. Divided by 1010, and that's subtract 1, I get 13.79%. Right? Now, another way you could do it is if you go back and say the capital gain was so much and the current yield was so much, and you add those two numbers together, you should get the same 13.79%. So I encourage you to double check those numbers and see that that works correctly. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll continue on the next recording.